Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Two Cyber Chicks podcast. You're about to join Erika and Jax for an inclusive cybersecurity conversation designed to educate and break the stereotypes of cybersecurity professionals while providing life hacks on how to handle burnout, networking, and goal setting. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hey Jax, you ready for this?
I am stoked.
Okay, well today we have a super special guest, Matt Halvorsen. Matt joins us with a super impressive background. He has spent the past 20 plus years working in the government agency sector, and also he's an adjunct professor, all while earning loads of brilliant recognition along the way. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with Two Cyber Chicks today. Jax and I are super excited to have you. Before we get started, we'd love to kick things off by just letting you give a quick intro on your background, your experience, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here also. It's great to speak to two cyber chicks. I have one cyber chick at home with my wife, but having two more is all right, makes it a little nice. So I appreciate that. So as you said, I'm Matt Halvorsen. I'm presently an FBI supervisory special agent on joint duty assignment to one of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence's mission centers. Specifically, I'm at the National Counterintelligence and Security Center in the Supply Chain and Cyber Directorate. That's a hell of a business card that makes my mom proud. The short version is I work supply chain threats. That's what I do. And I've been at NCSC now for about 2.5 years. I've been in the FBI for coming up on 20 years. And prior to being in the FBI, I was in the Navy for 5 years. It's been a heck of a career. I started out doing Italian organized crime in the New York field office of the FBI, where I did that for many years, which was stuff right out of books and movies, which don't really do it any credit to how much it really is. Then I transferred down to Washington, D.C., and got to work complex counterterrorism matters for a big portion of my career, which was pretty wild during the height of that we were dealing with in the mid-2000s. And then I started working really the intelligence matter issues. God, I can't even remember when it started in my career, but it's been heck of a ride. I've been doing the supply chain, as I said, for 2.5 years now. It's been incredibly interesting to enter into this space prior to, the pandemic showing up and punching everybody in the face with supply chain issues, right? And I'll say that we work the supply chain threat/security issues vice the logistical issues, right? It's a big differentiation that we want to talk about or mention. But they're all, kind of intermixed in that piece. And as you mentioned, I'm adjunct professor. I've been at Georgetown teaching now for a little over a year. I'm entering into my 5th semester teaching here come March, which has been a heck of a ride as well.
It is awesome. And that's how I met you, Matt, is through Georgetown. And I was in your supply chain risk class last term, and it was really insightful. I really appreciated all of the materials that you provided and all the interviews. And then I talked to Erika and I'm like, we've got to have him on the show. So I have to take a step back really quick. You said Italian crime units. Was that in the States, or I'm assuming that was CONUS here involved?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how cool is that? I'm thinking the first thing, and Erika wrote it over here, I was thinking like AK mob. Is that kind of what you were involved in?
That's exactly what I was involved in. Italian organized crime, traditional mob investigations, traditional Italian organized crime in the New York field office. So I specifically investigated the Colombo crime family. That was the family squad that I was assigned to. And I did that for 5 years. It was incredibly interesting, rewarding work. I worked with some tremendous investigators, really kind of earned my chops and learned the business of being a criminal investigator doing that work. It was a heck of a ride. But yeah, it is right in Brooklyn, Long Island, Manhattan. That was the general stomping ground of the family I worked.
That's so wild. And now we're fast forward and you are smack middle in supply chain. And you mentioned it, and I'm glad that you brought this up. You work in the cyber supply chain, which is different from some of the issues that we're seeing with the logistics of supply chain. So supply chain, the risks around it. What I'd like to do is take a moment and have you explain what is a supply chain attack? Why is there so much talk around these type of attacks? What are the risks and the threats associated with this type of attack? And why is it so impactful to our nation if we have one of these attacks hit us successfully?
There's a lot of questions in there, Jax, right? So generally what we talk about with a supply chain attack is where an adversary is indirectly attacking you, right? They're using one of your third parties as a threat vector to enter into your ecosystem. And so it's really a big part of it is third party risk. So it's understanding those relationships with third parties that you enter into, whether you're a government entity or a private entity, right? It's getting into those third party relationships and realizing that foreign intelligence adversaries are using your third party relationships, your vendors, as a threat vector to enter into your ecosystem. And when we talk about the types of threats, I break it down into two generalized types of threats from adversaries. The first is sabotage, and as it sounds, it's pretty basic forward. It's the ability to cease functionality, right? It is turning something off, the ability to cease functionality. So think of the power grid and being able to turn off the lights, right? That is a sabotage attack. Think of the ability to wipe your system clean, right? Erasing your data. That is a sabotage attack. And there's different reasons that a foreign adversary would conduct a sabotage attack. It could be in what we refer to in military parlance as OPE, operational prep in the environment, which means you want to conduct a sabotage attack to kind of distract individuals. Another type might be to get rid of a competitor, right? Wiping out their data, their research, their systems so that they're unable to continue business, right? That's another reason you would have a sabotage attack. The next generalized type of attack that we talk about is information theft. And we specifically use the term information theft because we don't want people to think that we are solely focused on classified information in government holdings, right? We are talking information which could include intellectual property, personally identifiable information, plans and intents, merger and acquisition information. So it's really information in the broadest sense. So we are not focused just on government. We are focused obviously on private sector as well. Part of the reason that we also want to broaden that term is the US government, generally speaking, doesn't own factories, right? We purchase everything from bullets, band-aids, battleships. The US government buys that stuff. So we need to make sure that we understand that intellectual property, that information is generally being held by private industry, right? Private industry is the one building those things. So they're the ones that generally have that information that's being attacked by foreign adversaries. Not to say that the classified information isn't of value, but it's not the only thing of value, right? There's plenty of information in the unclassified space that is of great value to foreign intelligence entities.
There's a lot to unpack there. And, Jax and I, from the cybersecurity lens, all the keywords that you were rattling off, they totally make sense. I can see why your focus has been there. So related, supply chain attacks have completely, gone through the roof. They've tripled in 2021 alone. We saw the uptick in software supply chain attacks, including SolarWinds, and then most recently with Log4j. Some of the factors associated with these breaches are open source software. What do you believe, if anything, if maybe a mix of things can help to reduce not only the occurrence, but then also the magnitude of these attacks that we've been seeing?
It really comes down to best practices, right? What best practices are there out there to help mitigate these threats? And there are a lot that organizations can do, and there's a lot on the horizon of things to come that'll really help with that. The first thing that you can do as an organization or as an individual to help mitigate the threat from these digital or software supply chain attacks is really good asset management, understanding what's in your systems, right? So you talk about Log4j, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people in boardrooms going around saying, is that a threat for us? Is that a problem for us? And if you don't have good asset management, do you know if you have Log4j? Right? If you don't know what's in your system, if you haven't done that asset management to know what software is on your system, what components are in there, then it's going to be pretty hard to address that. Otherwise, you're doing software scans to try and see if you have that footprint on there. So a good asset management is a good place to start in that, right? Another thing that's really kind of on the horizon is this concept of software bill of materials, or SBOM. And going along with SBOM is kind of software component analysis. So understanding if you can't get a software bill of materials from the software that you're purchasing is a good analysis of software, right? Using component analysis techniques to really understand that. So when I talk about software bill of materials, for those that are listening that may not be aware, that is really a breakdown of all of the components that are in the software, to include the open source components. Because a lot of software is not written anymore, right? It's Legos, the open source pieces, and people are taking those Legos. I use simple terms because I'm a knuckle dragging, law enforcement type, right? So we take these open source Lego software pieces and we click them together, and we have a piece of software, right? So you need to and that's what software bill of materials, which is really a big effort coming out of CIS has really taken some big piece of that. NTIA was a big piece of that, right? There's a lot of work going on understanding software bill of materials and coming up with structures to determine when software bill of materials is necessary. So that's going to be a big piece of that, is really understanding that. And building on those I came out of the Executive Order 14028, which was improving the nation's cybersecurity. And it was the definition of critical software that came out of that EO. So as you look at understanding your software components and your software bill of materials, is really looking at it for the critical software, and was coming up with a good definition of critical software. And NIST was charged with doing that under the EO. They released that not that long ago, their definition of software. And now CISA is going to take that definition and build it out into categories. So to summarize it, things you can do to help mitigate upfront would be asset management, looking at component analysis if you cannot get a software bill of materials. And then over horizon, I think we're going to see big pushes both from the government and on private industry for a good software bill of materials so that people know what they're buying into, right? So it's like when you purchase a car, right? When you purchase a car now, car manufacturers are required to show where all the components are manufactured. And that's what's going to be coming for software. I see that coming. I think most people in the industry see that as coming. How good that's going to be and what that regulation looks like, how much of it is self-directed, how much it is directed as government. I mean, that's a rulemaking, lawmaking process that's going through the motions right now.
Yeah, I just saw recently there was a bill they just passed called the TLDR, Terms of Service Labeling, Design, and Readability, which I thought was really clever that they labeled it TLDR. But the focus was providing a summary statement for users on websites to know what type of data is being used. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that. And you mentioned this on the software piece, is understanding what is in that software and knowing what we're going to be receiving. And I'm looking at it from a government side because a lot of the tooling we use is open source. And I don't know if you heard, and this was a recent report, it came out first part of January, but there was a developer which actually he sabotaged his own coding library to basically protest against mega organizations, which is a great show of activism. So my question, because I've thought about this, being somebody that works on the federal side and has been in the military and has used some of these open source toolings, what can we do to better protect our federal side? Is it eliminating all open source tooling? I know that's probably not possible, but how can we really secure ourselves when we're getting this open source tooling and we're not going to know if it has been sabotaged or if maybe some of the coding is bad?
Yeah, so we're not going to get rid of open source software. It's not going to be possible, right? Now, there are certain cases where you'll develop an in-house, so you'll specifically have a piece designed. Maybe it's on a national security system or some sort of critical system, right? But to get rid of it across the federal government would be, implausible, right? It's just, you can't do it in today's environment and how ubiquitous software is and how necessary to the development of software open source solutions and tools are, right? They're really necessary. So it's figuring that out. So I think part of it you'll see is maybe some sandboxing, right? Where software is run and partitioned first and run in kind of a secure sandbox environment to ensure there's no problems or in that. I think you'll see some more of that going on, which will include testing. There'll be increased testing depending on the level of criticality that the software is going to be using in an organization. I think you're going to see a big increase on that. I see an increase in partitioning of information, right? So that if systems are compromised, that, smaller pieces of data are being compromised. So I think I see some partitioning happening there. There's going to be, increased emphasis on encryption and the ability to use backups to get, back on track faster, right? It's one thing to have a backup of your system, but if that backup takes 2 weeks to unpack and get your system back up running, that's not, depending on your business, that's not really a viable. Like, you could be out of business in those 2 weeks because your competitor beat you out, or, if you're a government entity, before bad guys can do something really nefarious, right? So I think you'll see increases in the amount of speed that backups are being utilized to get things back into action. I think you'll see some there, but that's not really a mitigation as much as that is a disaster recovery plan, right? The SBOM initiative and the ability for the government, talking to your government listeners, the ability for the government to use that SBOM, right, is going to require learning on everyone's part. Right. And it's going to require people to actually understand the SBOM, use the SBOM. Right. So it's coming up with a structure that works for the purchaser to really understand what they're looking at. And then being able to, have that dialogue with the producer or vendor of that software. Right. Hey, this component, we're not happy with this component. We find that it's faulty, or it's got, bugs in it, or it's led us down the wrong way before. Can you retool the software without this component? And depending on the size of your purchase, right? If you're the federal government buying a giant suite, you might have the purchasing power to make those changes. If not, you might not be able to. But you have to have those discussions to know what your answer is going to be.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you highlighted a lot of things that have become even more important in the past couple of years, especially with the pandemic and the way that's impacted the way we work. So first off, asset management, I think backup and restoration, business continuity, disaster recovery, those were all the things that were kind of like beeping in my head. I was like, wow, all of these things have been highlighted so much. It introduced somewhat of like a rogue workforce and the need for all of these things to be in place. And so some organizations that were, not necessarily up to par and didn't have a good grasp on all these things before, we introduced this remote workforce. The pandemic really impacted a lot of organizations. We're still seeing some of that today. But I'm curious on how this all impacted your work. Did your work change at all, working in the space that you work?
Yeah. So it's a great question. How did it change? So here's one of the things that it did change is our phone started ringing off the hook. Right. That's one thing that these issues with the supply chain because of the pandemic really, caused the supply chain director to be on everybody's mind. Right. As I've said many times in the last year, nobody heard of supply chain until 20 months ago. And now you can't pick up the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg News without reading about it. Right. It's everywhere. So that's one thing, is it increased our workload a lot in a good sense. Right. It's good that people are wanting to, address these issues. So that's good. We've also seen a lot of high profile supply chain attacks happen in the last, 20 months. And that has really shown that this is a bigger problem than people knew it to be. These issues didn't appear, 20 months ago, right? They were happening before that. They just weren't on the radar of a lot of organizations because they were dealing with other matters. One of the things we say sometimes at NCSC is supply chain security today is where insider threat was 10 years ago. It is becoming ubiquitous to the calculus in organizations, whether you're a government organization focused on the security threats or whether you're a private business, focused on, risk and revenue, as private industry likes to focus on. Supply chain threats has become a bigger issue with that. It's been interesting talking more and more to private industry. I do a fair amount of that in my job. And it's been really interesting to hear private industry's calculus. So I've been very grateful to the increased outreach that's taken place as a result of the activities in the last 20 months. That's really broadened our understanding of the private industry's calculus. And it's really helped us, have a better dialogue with private industry and work on those public-private partnerships.
So CMMC, that is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. For anybody listening is not familiar with that. In January, as you're aware of, in January 2020, the government rolled out with the new CMMC certification. And since then, there's been some revisions. We're currently in revision 2.0. Could be more revisions. And for anybody that doesn't know that's listening, CMMC was really designed for a framework for implementation for companies that work specifically within the defense industrial base, or the DIB. And the government had rolled this out to find a better way of securing our supply chain, but really focused in on CUI data, known as controlled and classified information. And really this spurred from 2 decades ago, right around 9/11, and really realizing, hey, we're not very good. We, the government, are not very good with controlling our information and where it goes. And so I'm curious because I'm really passionate about the CMMC. I love this space because the focus is really on securing our supply chain and focused on our national security. However, there's some reservations that I have because the framework is creating a model to help organizations become compliant to secure their network in a way to identify where's our CUI data, let's secure it and let's protect it. But the flow of traffic and that CUI data going back and forth has not changed. So still have that flow. So what are your thoughts around, CMMC, especially with the revisions? Do you think this is a good first step that the government is doing for the due diligence? Do you think it's enough? Do you think maybe there needs to be some additional things to go with the CMMC to help us secure that supply chain and that CUI data? I know that's a lot.
No, it's a lot of questions. So I'll start with the first caveat, which is at NCSC, we are part of the intelligence community as opposed to the Department of Defense. So we are observers of the CMMC process and how DoD is doing it. We listen to what they're doing, we pay attention to it, but we are not contributors and we are not really providing a lot of direction on that. This is really kind of in their own lane. So that said, there's my caveat, right? I'm of the opinion that DoD, and I think they rightly are doing so, they need to do something, right? The DIB is an incredibly big, important part of the efforts that DoD has to move forward with. And they really understood that something had to be done. And sitting back and relying on self-attestation and was probably not going to be the way of the future and not going to work moving forward, right? And I don't think they wanted to go down the road of a naming and shaming either, right? I don't think they saw that as a viable way to do business, right? So that said, DoD has, their understanding of what they want to do. The DIB, their business model, right? So they may have something completely different. So trying to balance those two equities is not an easy task, right? It is not an easy task at all. I know that the revisions have given some people some pause, that it may have been, losing some teeth. The CMMC process might have losing teeth with version 2.0 as opposed to, what they originally rolled out. I don't know where that balance is going to be, right? I don't think it's going away, right? I don't think anybody believes that DoD is going to throw their hands up and say, all right, DIB, forget it. We'll let you go back to, business as usual. That said, my opinion also is I don't think DoD is, going to, drop their helmet and try and force their way into the DIB to do what they want, right? They're going to have to come to that balanced space, understanding that everybody, generally speaking, they both want the same thing. They want a secure environment where they can continue to provide the best support to the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense is getting good products at good value that they know are secure and are able to meet the mission space. That's a tough challenge. I think they're up to it. Is 2.0 the solution? Probably not, right? Yeah, there could be 3, 4, 5.0, right? They'll come to a middle ground on this, and it'll be interesting to see where the final rollout product is and how that affects the other sectors in the federal government, meaning the intelligence community sector and then the civil sector, right, with your non-Title 50 agencies. It'd be interesting to see how that is used, if it's used. And listen, I'm all for plagiarizing, right? I'll steal from the best federal agency, right? If somebody in the federal government's got a solution, why would I need to redo it? Why would I not just take that solution? So it would be, as a taxpayer, I'd be upset if the federal government didn't learn from DoD's experiences and use that in some of the other sectors. When is that going to take place? I think the other sectors might just wait a little bit longer and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. We never know when people will be held to something, nor do we know how long adoption will take. So That's a pretty safe thing to say for any of the certifications, frameworks, and everything in our space, just in general. So to be continued.
Yes.
Matt, I have a fun question for you. What is your favorite part about your job?
Wow, that's a good question.
There's just so many, right? So many things that are fun.
So I talked to somebody asked me a similar question when I was on a call a couple of weeks ago. And the favorite part of my job is interacting with some amazing people who really care, right? Who want to, it sounds so touchy-feely, kumbaya, right? But being with a group of people that really care and want to do the best, for the mission. That's a great thing to have, right? Having people that are mission focused and really care about providing the best support to the federal government, whether in my duties as an FBI agent or my duties, at DNI now, knowing that I get to work with those kind of people, that's really awesome. That's a great thing to have. Yes, that's the best part of my job.
I think that is an awesome answer. And for many, and I'll speak for myself, I think that is one of the reasons where organizations get sticky and the reason that you want to stay up and show up your face every single day. So yeah, it has been an absolute pleasure. This has been such an engaging conversation. Thank you so much for your time. If our listeners want to hear a little bit more or want to maybe get in touch with you, is there a best way to do that?
Yes, of course. So we have the standard website. We all have websites. So it's ncsc.gov. So November Charlie Sierra Charlie.gov. And then we have a website, which is, an email address for the Supply Chain Directorate, which is ncsc-supplychain@dni.gov. And that goes to all our folks in the Supply Chain Directorate. So if anybody has specific questions, we're happy to talk to them. If you're in the federal government, local government, state government, private industry, anybody who wants to talk, we're happy to talk to you. And the last plug I'll say is we are gearing up now. We just started gearing up today for April, this coming April, which is National Supply Chain Integrity Month. Anybody looking for events or anything to do for National Supply Chain Integrity Month? I think this is our 5th one this coming April, and yours truly is the cat herder for that. So happy to speak to anybody that wants to talk Supply Chain Integrity Month.
Awesome. Well, y'all heard it here first.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Matt. You were awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys. This was a blast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Two Cyber Chicks podcast with Erika and Jax. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.